I feel like I should have probably decorated for this. Hola my friends, this is Sal Montes and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, hello, welcome, glad to have you. Feel free to take a seat. Right where you are, that's good. Also subscribe if you like NHL parodies and skits. But if you're a returning viewer, you might have seen about a week and a half ago that we hit a pretty big milestone. That's right, after a little over a year of posting on this channel, we finally reached 1,000 subscribers! In all seriousness though, I know I already touched on this on a post and also briefly in one of the episodes for my Booster Curse series, but I really wanted to take a moment to thank you all again. As of recording, it's Friday, April 11th, so I went back to my channel and checked where I was a year ago, and we were literally sitting at 4 subscribers, which means that we've had over 1,000 people join us within that span. And y'all, I can't tell you how crazy that is to me. Having so many of y'all enjoy my videos enough to hang around for this long just kind of blows my mind, and so from the bottom of my heart, I really want to say thank you so much to all of you. The channel wouldn't even be close to what it is now if it wasn't for all of you, so go ahead and give yourselves a pat on the back and let's see, oh yeah, some stick taps for you, why not? Now, I've been planning to make this video as a way to celebrate this occasion for a while now. You probably already know what it is based on the title of the video, but basically as the channel has grown, I've had people ask me, hey, what teams do you root for? You know, you make videos about all 32 teams, so is there one that is your favorite team? Is there one team that you particularly hate? You know, I don't have anything on my bio or as part of my channel brand that distinctly associates me with any of the NHL teams, really. So I thought, what better way to celebrate 1K than to sit down with all of you for a bit and give you a little insight into myself as a person and also my fandoms. And we're going to be doing it with a tier list. So this isn't a traditional A to E tier list. I actually customized the tiers myself. And don't worry, I'm going to go through them in just a second to explain each of them, but I do have a big disclaimer to start off. After making parodies of every single fan base around the league for about a year now, I've found that I really don't hate any team in the NHL. Don't get me wrong, there's a couple of teams that I do find some enjoyment in watching them lose or go through a tough stretch just because I think it's funny. But the thing is, when I put these jerseys on, I try to have as much respect as I can for these fan bases because I know just how much these teams mean to so many people. So yeah, I love making fun of a lot of teams, but at the end of the day, it all has to be in good fun, you know? Alright, so the first tier is my teams, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's essentially my favorite teams that I've hitched my wagon into since I've been a hockey fan all these years. That's followed up by Special Attachment, which deals with some stuff back in my early days as a hockey fan. You know, these are teams that I kind of hold a special place in my heart for. The next tier is a little weird. I call it There's History, which I'll explain a little bit more when I get there, but it's still a positive thing for the most part, I would say. I'll explain it. Right smack in the middle, we have I like them and generally root for them. Again, that's also pretty self-explanatory. Below that is they are cool / I dig their aesthetics. It's mainly the latter one, to be honest. It's a lot of teams that I just really dig their uniforms or logos or whatever. Now we're reaching the more negative end of the tier list with depends on the storyline or context. These are teams that I usually don't care about too much, but they usually have something going on that's interesting enough for me to keep up with. Bottom tier is past unless channel related, which it's teams that I usually just don't care too much about and probably wouldn't know as much as I do about them if it wasn't for this channel. Anyways, let's head back to the top and start off with the My Teams tier list that includes the Pittsburgh Penguins and the LA Kings. So I became a hockey fan in 2014 during the Sochi Olympics, and I actually was just flipping channels when I stumbled upon the legendary TJ Oshie US versus Russia shootout. I had heard about hockey before, but the extent of my knowledge was the Miracle on Ice since I was just a Hispanic kid in South Florida at the time. Long story short, I fell in love with the sport right there, but I just didn't keep up with the rest of the Olympics for some reason, and it wasn't until a few weekends later that I was at the mall with my family at a local GameStop, and I found a used copy of NHL 10 for the PlayStation 3 that was only $5, and I ended up buying it. Now, it's been a long time, but I'm pretty sure that as the game was loading onto the console, it only allowed me to do an exhibition match between 2 teams. They usually have the 2 Stanley Cup finalists as the 2 playable teams in the demo, so because this game came out in 2009, it was the Detroit Red Wings and the Pittsburgh Penguins. The moment I saw the logo of the Penguin with the hockey stick, it just clicked for me for some reason. And also, since they were the champions that year, their team had the best stats in the game, and so they were just the most fun team to play as. I would eventually go on to find the TV schedule for NHL games, so whenever a Penguins game was on, I would do my best to watch it. You know, they were contenders that year. I'm pretty sure they won their division as well, so it was just really fun getting to cultivate my fandom with that. And not only did I get the privilege of watching them win back-to-back cups a couple years later, it's actually because of this team that I ended up meeting one of my closest friends and eventual college roommates, so thanks for that, Pittsburgh Penguins! Next to them we have the LA Kings, and I'll just be honest with you, I was a 2014 Cup bandwagoner. I just vaguely remember seeing that the Sharks were up 3-0 in their first round series against the Kings, and then I checked back like a couple days later and they're forcing a Game 7? Which piqued my interest enough heading into the Anaheim series, even though I didn't watch a ton of it. And by the time we got to the conference finals, the Pittsburgh Penguins were already out, so I wasn't going to root for New York. I didn't really like the Montreal Canadiens back then either. And in the Western Conference, I wasn't crazy about the Chicago Blackhawks, so honestly, I just ended up rooting for the Kings all the way to the final. Like I said, I was in Florida at the time, so I remember Game 5 of the Stanley Cup final between the Kings and the Rangers going until like 1 or 2 a.m. for me, which at the time was the latest I'd ever stayed up for anything beyond like New Year's Eve. And you know, getting to watch Alec Martinez score the OT game winner live while I was alone in a dark living room at like 1 or 2 a.m. in South Florida, that was just such a fun moment for me. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I eventually found out that the goalie in that US versus Russia game at the Sochi Olympics was Jonathan Quick, who played for the Kings, so that just made it even easier for me to root for them. I still like the Penguins way too much, plus Sidney Crosby had kind of become my favorite player at the time, so I didn't want to jump ship all the way, but I did figure, hey, one team is in the Eastern Conference, the other's in the West, so what harm is there in cheering for both? And little did I know that about 6 years later, I'd end up moving to LA and everything just kind of tied nicely. Moving down to the special attachment tier, we have the Florida Panthers and the St. Louis Blues. So basically, when I became a hockey fan, I was a high school student in South Florida, and while I didn't necessarily consider Florida a hometown, I did sort of adopt the Panthers eventually as my hometown team. It was weird. I live in like a cusp between like the Tampa Bay Lightning TV area and the Florida Panthers TV area, so I ended up getting both teams' games if I remember correctly. And we'll talk about the Lightning in just a second, but there was just such a charm about the Panthers at the time. This was the summer where they picked #1 overall, so they were really bad. And yeah, the following season, they weren't that much better, but they did have a fun chemistry between the young guys and the old guys. Then when I went to college in 2016, I kind of took a break from pretty much everything because of just how hard the schoolwork was. So later, when I came back to hockey in around 2021, 2022, I was completely shocked to learn that the Florida Panthers were now like President's Trophy contenders, Stanley Cup contenders. It blew my mind. And I'm not gonna lie, watching them win the cup last year was pretty fun and pretty special. Next to them, I have the St. Louis Blues, who I actually moved up a little bit on this list because I didn't realize just how much I really liked the Blues when I first became a hockey fan. It partly has to do with the fact that I logged onto Facebook for the first time in like 3 or 4 years, went to the About Me section on my profile to see which teams I had liked as a kid, and you know, I had the Penguins, I had the Kings, I had the Panthers, but I also had the St. Louis Blues, and that got me to thinking as to why that was the case. And obviously, I already mentioned the TJ Oshie shootout, and that actually made me remember that he was like my first favorite player in the NHL. Honestly, if it wasn't for that used $5 copy of NHL 10 where I picked the Penguins as my favorite team, I probably would have ended up being a St. Louis Blues fan. Going back to that game, actually, so my favorite mode in any of the NHL games has always been Be a Pro. It's just the style of gameplay that I like to play personally, so every time I get a new one, that's strictly what I play. The game that I play the most then being that NHL 10 game, and while I didn't get drafted by the St. Louis Blues, more on that in just a second, I did end up going to play for them and winning like 2 or 3 Stanley Cups because, you know, I was a kid and playing on easy mode all the time. It was just what I found fun. So that's why I think my fandom for the St. Louis Blues kind of grew a little bit. By the time we get to 2016, right before that break period, you know, TJ Oshie had already left for the Washington Capitals, so I didn't have a lot of reason to root for the Blues. But I do remember hearing about the 2019 Cup and being pretty happy that they got one. Okay, next here we have There's History, which includes the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like I said, when I was in high school, I got both Panthers games and Lightning games on local TV. The only difference being, obviously, that the Lightning were much better than the Panthers. And by the time we got to the following year's Cup final between the Lightning and the Blackhawks, the Penguins had already been eliminated in round one, so did the Blues, and the Kings, I don't think they even qualified for the playoffs that next season. And me wanting to root for a team, I was just kind of left with two options, and I figured, hey, I'll ride with the other Florida team. What's funny is I vaguely remember blaming their goalie, Ben Bishop, not being 100% for the loss, and then being very mad that they were kind of transitioning away from him to this brand new young goalie that I just did not think was going to make it in this league. He wore some stupid number like 88 or something, and, who knows what happened to that guy? I don't know. Just awful taste, I tell you. So yeah, at the time, Tampa was almost right up there with the Kings and the Penguins, but that kind of died down pretty fast. And when I came back to watching the NHL at around 2021, 2022, I found out that the Tampa Bay Lightning went back-to-back in the shortened bubble seasons. And it wasn't until the next year that I felt like my fandom for the Lightning really took a hit because of the Toronto Maple Leafs. I know you're probably sick of me for talking about this game for forever already, but going back to NHL 10, the first PA Pro that I ever created was actually drafted to the Toronto Maple Leafs. I did not know anything about this team back then. This was like peak bad Maple Leafs, I'm pretty sure. Like, the roster was just garbage. I don't even think they had like a Phil Kessel or a Nazem Kadri yet. Like, it was a really bad roster, which is probably why I ended up going first overall to them. Still, I went along with it because I just really wanted to play the game, and I kid you not, this is so funny looking back on it, but I ended up winning 3 straight Stanley Cups during my ELC. Then I signed, I think, a 2-year extension with the Leafs and won 2 more Stanley Cups. So it was 5 straight Stanley Cups for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And now I know the context of, they haven't won something since 1967. So the fact that I just straight up won 5 with them in a row is so funny to think about right now. And years later, in 2021, 2022, when I started to watch the NHL again, one of the reasons why I got really into it again was the Steve Dangle podcast, which, if you're a viewer from my channel, you've probably heard of them by now. I didn't necessarily see myself as a Leafs fan, but seeing them go through like the pain of being one made me really root for them in the playoffs. So it was just even more unfortunate seeing them eventually blow their chance in round 1 against the Lightning that year. It was a pretty devastating one for sure. And on top of that, you might have noticed that I've been wearing my Leafs jersey this whole time, and the reason why I have is because this is the first hockey jersey that I've ever owned. I believe this is a 2022 Heritage Classic jersey from their game against the Sabres that season, and it went on sale on the NHL website, so I figured, hey, I've always wanted a hockey jersey, I like this one, so why not get it? And it was my first ever, so that's why it kind of holds a special place in my heart for that. And with all the stuff that I just talked about, I bet you're probably wondering, why aren't the Leafs a tier above then, along with the Panthers and the Blues, for this special attachment that I have? And the reason is, when I played NHL 10, when I played those 5 years in NHL 10 with the Leafs, the only thing that I wanted was for my character to get the C for the captaincy, and the Leafs never gave it to me. I had broken every single scoring record, taken the 30th place team to 5 straight Stanley Cups. My character was, a first-line center, 98 overall, but they kept giving the C to random 76 overall players on the 4th line, and that's the reason why I ended up signing with the Blues after that, because I was done with the Leafs, and I still held the grudge, which is why I placed them just 1 tier below Florida and the St. Louis Blues. So I had a lot to say about those first 6 teams since, they're at the top. I naturally have more stuff to talk about them. But we're going to try to go a little bit quicker now that we're going to have more teams in each tier. Moving on to the next tier with I like them and generally root for them, we have the Columbus Blue Jackets, Minnesota Wild, the Ottawa Senators, Seattle Kraken, and the San Jose Sharks. Starting with the Blue Jackets, again, everything in my fandom is traceable back to either NHL 10 or the Sochi Olympics, because eventually I found out that Sergei Bobrovsky, the Russian goalie, was the Blue Jackets goalie at the time, so that made me a fan of the Blue Jackets. You know, there's just something about scrappy teams like getting into the playoffs and really fighting for it that I really enjoy. But yeah, I liked Columbus well enough, and honestly, this season just made me like them even more. I know it's been a tough year for Blue Jackets fans, Flames fans as well, and hockey fans in general, given the passing of Johnny and Matty Gaudreau. But the resilience that the Blue Jackets team this year has shown really just made them so likable. They kind of did flame out a little bit here at the end of the regular season and missed out on a possible wildcard spot, which really sucks. It would have been so cool to see them make it. But, you know, there's just so much to be proud of with the team. So I'm very happy to support them whenever I can. With the Minnesota Wild, pretty much the moment Marc-Andre Fleury joined them, I just had to start supporting them. Flower is like one of my favorite people of all time, so seeing him leave the Penguins was heartbreaking enough for me, but then you have the whole Vegas Golden Knights, the Chicago Blackhawks controversy, all that stuff. So by the time he landed in Minnesota, it just made me really happy to see the fans embrace him and really take care of him. He's had his ups and downs and is probably retiring at the end of the season, but because of him, I've gotten to watch more Minnesota Wild games, and I'm glad I have. They have some unreal talent with Kaprizov in favor there. It just really sucks that injuries have played such a pivotal role in their last couple of seasons. And as an LA Clippers fan who has had pretty much every postseason derailed by injury, I very much sympathize with that. So yeah, I like the Wild a fair amount. Also on this tier, we have the Ottawa Senators, and if you would have asked me at the beginning of the season if I would have had the Sens this high up, I would have probably said no, but this season has really, made me like them a lot. I just mentioned I'm an LA Clippers fan in the NBA, and you know, they are the little brother, the second team, the B team in LA behind the Lakers. That's something that I'll admit, you know, is probably never going to change because it is what it is. So the fact that the Sens are always kind of in the shadow of the other Ontario team, the Maple Leafs, and even the Montreal Canadiens to an extent, I just know what it feels like to hate when, you know, your home game gets flooded by fans from the opposing team and, you know, they're cheering way louder for the away team when they score than when your team scores. So the fact that the Sens are getting a chance to prove themselves in the playoffs this season, I just think that's really awesome. We've also had some great stories throughout the year with, you know, Jake Sanderson really coming into his own as a top young defenseman in this league. Also, the goalie rotation has been so fun to watch this season because you have Allmark being unbeatable at times for a couple of stretches, but then having to cool down a little bit, so then Anton Forsberg really has to stick up for the team and keep them afloat for a while. And of course, you had the run where both of them got injured, so the load kind of fell on top of Levi Merilainen, who ended up being spectacular for that stretch. So rounding out the tier, we have the Kraken and the Sharks, and with the Kraken, I mainly fell in love with them because of their online presence. You know, all of the research that I do for my videos comes from the internet, and a large portion of it comes from Twitter. Having to go through dozens of posts, comments every single day, it can get pretty exhausting. So the fact that the Kraken always keep it very upbeat and, you know, kind of fun in their social media just made me like them a lot. Just the whole Seattle culture, I think, is really cool with the whole eating of the fish. That kind of stuff is really fun to me. Also, their uniforms are just really good. And even though they've definitely taken a couple of steps back since their playoff debut, I still root for them and I hope they can get back into it fairly soon. The Sharks kind of fall in line with the Blue Jackets in that they're just such an easy team to root for. And so while their last couple of years have been really tough watches, this year is starting to look like they're finally reaping the benefits of being bad for so long. Obviously, you already have Celebrini and Smith knocking it out of the park in just their first seasons in the NHL, but you can't forget about Askarov, Luka Medulin, Musty, and also Colin Graff, who's kind of an underrated young guy. So yeah, when they say the future is teal, I genuinely believe the future most definitely is teal. Alright y'all, I'm back a couple days later because my phone actually ran out of storage to record, so I had to take all that footage, edit it, and delete it so I can make space to record more. While editing, I did make a couple changes to the list that I'll talk about during the ranking, but I won't make the final edit to the list until the very end. Also, a second point actually, I forgot to mention that within each tier, I didn't order the teams in any specific way. Or it might have been alphabetical actually, but the point is that the teams are on pretty equal ground in that tier. And you know, things kind of change here and there every once in a while, so like Stephen A. Smith says, the list is fluid. Okay, moving to the they are cool / I dig their aesthetics tier. I'm going to go through them a little bit quicker this time because I'm not trying to make a 1 hour long video. And we have the Anaheim Ducks, Buffalo Sabres, the Calgary Flames, the Dallas Stars, Montreal Canadiens, Nashville Predators, the Vegas Golden Knights, the Winnipeg Jets, the Utah Hockey Club, and the Vancouver Canucks. Gonna get these two right out of the way actually. Buffalo and Montreal, I did move up one tier after editing. The Sabres have my all-time favorite jersey and the goat head, so that's why I probably put them in the aesthetics tier right away. But in retrospect, I do have a lot more love for the Sabres than just that, and I truly would want nothing more than for the Buffalo Sabres to snap that streak and get back into the playoffs. Oh, and also in the Mount Rushmore of NHL goalies, Dominik Hasek has always been my favorite one, so there's also that. And with Montreal, it's basically the same comments as the Ottawa Senators. Did I think they were going to be better than last year? Yeah. Did I expect Lane Hudson to transcend the loss of space and time? No, but it was a welcome surprise. In all seriousness though, there's so many great stories, you know, Caulfield changing his number to 13 to honor Johnny Gaudreau, Laine coming back from a pretty tough last season and also an injury this season to be just a power play menace. Well, maybe not the entire year. And then more recently, the way this team has rallied around Brandon Gallagher during this really difficult time for him and his family. Truly a wonderful season for the power of friendship, but after this weekend, they really gotta lock down and get a win or Columbus might just sneak past them. Okay, I guess now we really are moving to the aesthetics tier, beginning with Anaheim. I know I might be saying something very controversial, but I never thought the Duckfoot logo was that bad. However, I will admit that the uniforms right now are probably an improvement on that. Also, they got some great young talent there like McTavish, Gauthier, Carlson, and my personal favorite, the Dust Wall! As for Calgary, they also have a pretty elite uniform lineup. And while I really like Dostal, Calgary has a goalie that might end up terrorizing the entire Western Conference in the next couple of years. I don't know how the Calder race will sort itself out to 3 candidates, but if Dustin Wolf wound up one of the nominees, I would not be surprised at all. Also, shout out to Alberta, since I'm pretty sure they made up one of the largest percentages of viewers on my channel for the past year. Dallas is similar to Anaheim in that I got bored of the previous uniforms and very much preferred what they have now. To me, they've had a perfect mix of veteran leadership and young talent the last couple years, and I always predict they'll make the Stanley Cup final only to fall a bit short. Also, my shorts reacting to their series against Vegas last season were the first ones to really pop off for the channel, so I'm very appreciative of that. Nashville could have probably been one tier higher, but because of how miserable to watch this season was, I had to demote them to I just like their aesthetics. I think their logo is pretty great, and all they really need at this point is a good coach to get this team going. Or maybe a priest to exorcise them. I don't know what's going to help at this point. Vegas, great aesthetics, great atmosphere at T-Mobile Arena. I mean, they have a dragon for Pete's sake. I do like that they've leaned more onto the gold jerseys as opposed to the gray ones, and the road ones are pretty elite to me. Only thing with teams like Vegas and Dallas is that, you know, they're really good. They're always winning, so you just kind of roll your eyes sometimes because you're like, if it's not my team, I wish it was somebody else getting an opportunity to win, you know? Winnipeg Jets, I love all their jerseys. They knock it out of the park every single time for me. Best goalie in the league, and as you probably realized by now, I really like goalies because I keep bringing them up all the time. I especially really love Comrie. He's just an angel and needs to be protected at all times, in my opinion. But it really feels like come April, Winnipeg is a really fun place to be for a playoff game. You know, Utah is a tricky one because while I think their inaugural season was a complete success and it opened the doors for brand new hockey fans to enjoy the sport, it doesn't get lost to me that it does kind of come at the expense of the Arizona Coyotes fan base. Me personally, I'm very split on expansion since, you know, I love getting new jerseys, but at the same time, covering 32 teams already kind of kills me. But as someone who grew up in the non-traditional market of South Florida, I do recognize the importance of having hockey in these areas, so I hope that a team makes its way back to the desert very soon. As for the Utah Hockey Club, you know, I might have to move them one tier down to depends on the storyline or context. Weirdly enough, the logo, the jerseys, the fact that the fan base calls itself the Clubbers now, it's all made me like the current brand, but I don't know, I feel like I need something more. Last, we have Vancouver, and oh my goodness, yo, Vancouver Twitter is not for the faint of heart, I tell you. Vancouver is one of those fan bases that whenever I'm making a video about them, it's very easy to find a million different opinions online. Like this year, covering the whole PD versus JT Miller thing was just insane. But you know what? I love Nucks fans for that. And like with Nashville, I just feel like this season was just so frustrating to watch, and fans really deserve better. Okay, depends on the storyline or context. In this tier, we have the Boston Bruins, Carolina Hurricanes, Colorado Avalanche, Detroit Red Wings, Edmonton Oilers, New Jersey Devils, New York Islanders, and the Washington Capitals. Boston is weird, man, because I actually went to college in Boston, but like I said, I was just so not prepared for the level of rigor that I encountered in college that aside from, maybe a couple of games in the Stanley Cup Finals, I did not watch hockey at all. So, for 4 years, I kind of missed out on the opportunity to experience being a hockey fan in Boston, which is really unfortunate. With Boston, it's funny because, the past 2 years, it was kind of like Vegas where I was just like getting really tired of watching them win all the time. And this year, it was like Nashville, just really hard to watch. So yeah, there just wasn't a lot of enjoyment for me watching the Boston Bruins the last couple of years. Carolina is kind of like Dallas in that I've had them in my Stanley Cup final for the past couple of years, with the only difference being that I don't like their logo or uniforms as much as I like Dallas's. But listen, I am happy for the fans that this team has managed to get out of the whole Mikko Rantanen debacle with a really good team heading into the playoffs. Which again, that's kind of the idea of this tier. It's a team that I don't necessarily hate, but it's just I only really follow them for a specific storyline like this whole Rantanen deal. Speaking of Rantanen, we have the Colorado Avalanche next up. Like the good teams above them, the Avalanche win pretty often, partly thanks to the massive talent they have in McKinnon and Makar alone. I'm glad they finally got over the hump a couple years ago, and full transparency, I was straight up rooting for them more than the Lightning that year. But it wasn't until they started making all these crazy trades that I got really invested in their season. And right now, the biggest storyline for me is Gabe Landeskog ramping up for a possible playoff return, and good for him and for the fans. I really wish them well. Next, we have the Detroit Red Wings, which I'll be completely honest, I did move one tier down to pass. When comparing them to other teams that struggle this season, like Nashville, like Vancouver, I'd probably give those teams a little bit more grace because, well, Vancouver flip-flops very often. And while on paper, Nashville's roster might make their season seem a little bit more disappointing than Detroit's, it just feels like Detroit is not progressing enough, which is more disappointing to me than a roster that was just assembled this past summer, failing to meet expectations in Nashville. And I've made fun of the Yzer plan before, but you still got great talents there like Mo Seider, Lucas Raymond, Alex DeBrincat, Dylan Larkin. I mean, there is talent there. I personally don't see there being a better replacement for Yzerman available right now, but something needs to change, and I don't know what. Because like with Buffalo, the fans deserve way more than 9 years without a playoff appearance. And no, just because the Lions, the Pistons, and the Tigers are good does not mean that the Red Wings get to slack off. The fans and also the broadcast team are way too good to deserve that. Next, we have the Oilers. In full transparency, they would probably be higher if it wasn't for the last 500 first-round series they've had against the Kings. I'm just done. I can't take this anymore. But yeah, unless it's something like Draisaitl goes for a 15-game point streak and scores 50 goals for the season, there's really not a ton that I get invested in with the Edmonton Oilers. It feels like a lot of the conversation this year has revolved around the goaltending, which I completely understand. They have needed to upgrade on that end for a while, in my opinion. But as someone who has to come in and write a joke about the Oilers every single week, it gets really tiring when all I see in the comments is people complaining about the goaltending. The Devils are actually a team I kind of enjoy parodying a lot in this channel. I actually had them winning the division this season with Jack Hughes blowing up for a Hart Trophy type of year. And while I do understand injuries have played this team pretty badly, they've been just such a frustrating watch sometimes. Also, something I forgot to mention while talking about the Penguins and the Kings at the beginning is that because I became a Kings fan during the playoffs when divisions didn't really matter too much, I didn't grow any real resentment towards other Pacific Division teams. Whereas with the Penguins, I became a fan during the regular season, back when we had stuff like the Wednesday night rivalry, and it was made very clear to me that all the other Metro teams were the enemy and I was supposed to hate them. With the only exception being Columbus because of Bob. But yeah, I really hope everyone gets healthy next season and they can have a much more enjoyable and fun run next year. Wait, I just remembered about Douglas D. Admin and Curtis Lazar. Should I? No, I'm keeping them there, I'm sorry. The Islanders also get a couple points off because of the whole Metro Division thing. And similar to the Red Wings, I just feel like management has not figured out what they want to do with this team. And it really sucks in particular because I'm a big Ilya Sorokin fan. I feel like he is insanely underrated. But aside from a few pieces like Horvat Nelson, Noah Dobson last season, it really feels like there's nothing there for the Isles to really build on anymore. But for some reason, Lou Lamoriello just cannot accept that. And just like Isles fans, I'm tired of rewatching the same rerun every season. So for that reason and the whole Metro thing, I did end up moving the New York Islanders down. At this point, they're kind of the clear definition of I don't deal with this team unless it's for the channel. And I really feel for fans because of that. Last up, we have the Capitals. And again, going back to the whole rivalry thing with the Pittsburgh Penguins, Caps, to me, were always the #1 rival, so they were really easy to root against all the time. And when Marc-Andre Fleury led that Vegas Golden Knights team to the 2018 Stanley Cup Final against the Caps, I was rooting hard against the Capitals. But again, this tier depends on the storyline or context, and I think my favorite storyline of the past couple seasons, since that Stanley Cup Final to be honest, has been Ovechkin's legacy. He eventually passes Gordie Howe for second all-time in scoring, which is already amazing that he scored 800 goals. But even though the Capitals were no longer that dominant, he still kept up pretty good production in goal scoring. And the fact that he did break the record by scoring 40-plus goals in a season where he broke his leg, it blows my mind. So on my end, there is nothing but respect for the Caps, and honestly, they were one of the most fun teams to cover this season since the vibes were so good all the time. And finally, we have arrived at the last tier, which includes teams that I would probably pass on if it wasn't for this channel, and those teams are the Chicago Blackhawks, the Philadelphia Flyers, and the New York Rangers, along with the Red Wings and the Islanders, which I'll add in just a second later. I actually want to start with Philly first because I think I did move them up one tier, mainly because of Matvei Michkov. His case for the Calder includes some really great hockey this season, while playing with a not-so-great Philly team. Add on top of that all of Tort's shenanigans this year, and it was a very funny watch. Like, Philly fans watching, I appreciate the support, and believe me, every time I put on that jersey, I try to connect to your passion as much as I can. But man, watching the Flyers flounder around is it's really funny. I'm sorry. So yeah, because of the storylines and the enjoyment that I get out of that, I did end up moving the Flyers one tier. Next we have Chicago, which, as I explained in my LA Kings section of the video, I did not really enjoy watching the Chicago dynasty back when it was happening. I just found them winning every time so much more annoying than any other team for some reason. Actually, them beating Tampa in 2015 had a lot to do with it, I think. And you know, not to get too much into it, but the organization, so not the fans, I feel like they've done some really sucky things for the past decade, and that's something that the NHL never really addressed properly, in my opinion. But I've definitely seen fans who share a similar opinion, and all they really want is for this team to be better on and off the ice. Obviously, this wasn't a very fun year for Hawks fans, but I do hope that next year those rookies do take another step up for the sake of the fans. Until then, though, I might miss out on a couple of Chicago games unless I have to. And now the very last team I'm going to talk about today, it is the New York Rangers. Where do I even begin? The Rangers kind of encompass a lot of things that I haven't enjoyed from a couple of different teams that I've already talked about. There's history dating back to 2014 when I really wanted the Kings to beat them. They were incredibly good last season and they just kept on winning all the way to the Eastern Conference Final. But then management gets in the way of a team that won the President's Trophy the year before and just completely obliterates the team culture that was there. And you know, some of the things that the front office did this season, like waiving Goudreau when he blocked the trade to the San Jose Sharks, then threatening to waive their captain unless he approved the trade out to Anaheim, and then not being able to recognize that Peter Laviolette just wasn't the answer months ago. It was a true recipe for disaster. And on top of that, you have the majority of your roster regress drastically from last year with off years for Zibanejad, Kreider, Panarin, Fox. Even Igor had a couple of stinkers here and there throughout the year. And you know, even though I did think this collapse was kind of funny, those trades made the front office look a little bit more mean-spirited than, say, like Philly. And it got to the point that, along with probably other Rangers fans, I just didn't want to watch this team anymore, even to clown on them. And for that reason, I do have them at that bottom tier in my list. Okay, so I have updated the final list. Here it is. Feel free to check it out. And yeah, wow, I can't believe I managed to talk about all 32 teams. That's actually a little crazy. Oh boy, I hope I didn't ramble for too long and made this a crazy long video. Shout out to you if you made it till the end of this video. Yeah, this ended up being a lot more work than I was expecting, but let me know if you enjoyed it and would like to see more of these types of videos in the future. So yeah, thank you for watching this video. Thank you for being subscribed and getting this channel to 1,000. It really means the absolute world to me that y'all have decided to stick around for so long. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, share this with a friend. And as always, remember that kindness is free to give, so please go out and spread some today.